Imagine a policy so impactful it causes the loss of 86 million acres of land from just one group of people.
Yeah, or think about a system explicitly designed to, quote, kill the Indian and save the man. Stark phrases.
Really stark. Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Today we are looking closely at a really crucial, often painful, and deeply complex part of North American history. We're talking about the policies, the actions that profoundly reshaped Native American communities. And you've shared just a stack of fascinating sources. I mean, everything from 18th century colonial tactics right up to 21st century healing initiatives.
It's the breadth that's really striking, isn't it? You have these historical accounts, massacres, big government acts like the Dawes Severalty Act, but then also investigative reports on the boarding schools and even personal stories of resilience, of land reclamation. Taken together, they paint this comprehensive picture, often harrowing, yes, but comprehensive. It's a long, multifaceted struggle.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is, well, to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, those key insights. We want to help you understand the motivations behind these policies, the sometimes devastating methods used, and of course their lasting impact. But also, crucially, we want to touch on the incredible endurance, the ongoing efforts of Indigenous peoples for justice, for cultural revitalization.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really have to start at the beginning, don't we? With the arrival of European colonizers. Because that immediately introduced diseases like smallpox. Just devastating. Wiped out huge numbers of Native Americans, made organized resistance incredibly difficult from the outset.
And that raises a difficult question. Were these diseases always just accidental side effects of contact? What's fascinating, or rather disturbing, is we have documented evidence from the 18th century. Think about the 1763 incident at Fort Pitt. You have Lord Geoffrey Amherst, a British superior officer, explicitly suggesting using smallpox-infected blankets. His words were, send the smallpox among those disaffected tribes of Indians. Yeah, urging his subordinate to use every stratagem in our power to reduce them, and later, even more bluntly, to extirpate this execrable race.
Extirpate?
Yeah.
That's chilling.
It is. No, it's not entirely clear if that specific attempt worked as intended, but the very willingness to even consider it, I mean, it violated civilized notions of war even back then. Disease doesn't discriminate.
That detail really sets a grim precedent, doesn't it, for the kind of dehumanization we see later. And speaking of early accounts, there's Bartolomé de las Casas. His short account of the destruction of the Indies from 1598. He was a Spanish friar, saw it all firsthand.
Ah, Las Casas. His work is incredibly important. He arrived in Hispaniola, 1502. And initially, he actually profited from the encomienda system.
Which was essentially forced labor, right?
Basically, yes, a form of legalized slavery. But he had this transformation, renounced it, and became a fierce advocate, even petitioning the Spanish king. He used this really powerful, deliberate biblical language, comparing indigenous people to sheep amongst the Spanish wolves, emphasizing their, spiritual purity. He was fundamentally challenging the wider morality of early colonization. It shows that even within the colonial powers, there were voices questioning the brutality.
That's a crucial point. So, okay, let's move forward. Into the 19th century, the U.S. is expanding, and the focus shifts dramatically. It becomes all about land acquisition. Often, it seems, at any cost.
Indeed. You see this clearly with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by President Andrew Jackson. It essentially gave the government power to exchange land west of the Mississippi for Native American lands in the east, which sounds maybe neutral, but
led to forced relocations, like the Trail of Tears.
Yeah, exactly. The Trail of Tears in 1838, thousands of Cherokee died. Disease, starvation, exposure on this forced 1,200-mile march. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it really established this pattern. Federal removal, creation of reservations, that becomes the template.
And these reservations, I mean, maybe they were presented as a solution sometimes, but one source says they had catastrophic results. What was life actually like there? How did it impact culture?
Daily life was incredibly difficult, designed to break down traditional life. Tribes lost their ancestral lands, which made it almost impossible to continue their traditional ways, their economies, their cultures. You had hunters struggling to become farmers on unfamiliar, often poor land. Feuding tribes, sometimes forced together. Starvation was pretty common.
And deliberate assimilation efforts on top of that.
Oh, absolutely deliberate. Pressure to wear non-Indian clothes, learn English, become Christian, adopt new gender roles, men forced into farming, women into more domestic roles. This completely disrupted long-standing social structures, how communities function.
So beyond these, systemic pressures and hardships, the 19th century also saw Just horrific acts of direct violence. Massacres. Our sources detail several.
The pattern is it's stark and brutal. Take the 1782 Gnadenhutten massacre. Pennsylvania militiamen murdered 96 Christian Indians. These were converts, pacifists,
How?
by hammering their skulls. Then they burned the village. 39 children, 29 women, 28 men. They claimed revenge for other conflicts, but these people were innocent.
Unbelievable.
Then, 1860, the Tulawa massacre in California. White settlers attacked a sleeping Wyatt village during a sacred ceremony, killed women, children, elders with hatchets, clubs. One survivor, a baby, Jerry James, found in his dead mother's arms. The nearby town Eureka was called Murderville in newspapers after that.
Murderville.
Yeah.
Mm.
Then you have Sand Creek, 1864. Colonel Chivington's troops attacked a Cheyenne and Arapaho camp. They were flying a U.S. flag, a white flag of peace. Killed at least 150, mostly women, children, elderly. Soldiers scalped them, mutilated bodies. A congressional committee later called it a foul and dastardly massacre.
Congress itself called it that.
They did, and there were others like the Marias Massacre in 1870 against the Blackfeet, again, mostly women, children, elderly, many sick with smallpox. The Army tried to cover up the scale. And finally, Wounded Knee in 1890, often seen as the end of the major Indian Wars. U.S. cavalry killed around 150 Sioux, nearly half women and children. This followed government panic about the ghost dance movement.
These stories are just incredibly hard to hear, but vital. Vital to understand the reality of that era. So after these kinds of horrific events, how did the government formalize the push for assimilation through, like, overarching policy?
Right, that shift from maybe overt violence in some cases to more systemic policy. That brings us squarely to the Dawes Severalty Act of 1887, named for Senator Henry Dawes. This act completely flipped the script on land ownership. It reversed the long-standing policy of communal tribal land use. Instead, it gave the president power to divide reservations into individual, privately owned plots, like 160 acres for a family man, 80 for a single man, 40 for boys. Noticeably, women got nothing directly.
Okay, so there might have been some people who genuinely thought this would help Native Americans assimilate, become farmers, like European settlers.
Mm-hmm.
But what was the real motivation? The real impact?
The most significant motivation, according to the sources, was simple: Anglo-American hunger for Indian lands. That's the phrase used. See, the act specified that after these individual plots were assigned, the sizable remainder, and this was often the best land, would be opened up for sale to white settlers.
Ah, the surplus land.
Exactly. The consequence: Indigenous peoples lost 86 million acres. That's 62% of the land they held before 1887. Gone. So while some friends of the Indian, as they were called, maybe supported it, thinking it would bridge the chasm between barbarism and civilization.
A problematic phrase in itself.
Hugely problematic. But in reality, it was, quote, a very effective tool for taking lands from Indians and giving it to Anglos. It used the language of uplift to achieve a massive land grab.
So the Dawes Act attacks tribal cohesion through land. But there was another powerful tool for assimilation, equally, if not more, traumatic. The Indian boarding school system.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where things get, well, profoundly heartbreaking. Another layer of systematic cultural destruction.
Yes. The Civilization Fund Act of 1819 kind of kicked this off. It led to about 408 federally supported boarding schools, both on and off reservations, across 37 states. And some operated surprisingly recently, until 1969. The model, the blueprint, was the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, started in 1879. And its founder, Richard Henry Pratt, was very explicit about the goal. His famous quote, "Kill the Indian and save the man."
Just lays it bare. And the methods used to achieve this saving, as you call it, they were brutal, weren't they? What did our sources say about the daily experience?
Oh, absolutely brutal. Children, sometimes as young as 4, were forcibly taken from their families. Attendance was federally mandated. When they arrived, stripped of identity, haircut, traditional clothes replaced with military-style uniforms, given new Anglo-American names.
Forced to give up their names.
Their names, their language, forbidden to speak their tribal languages. Punishments were harsh, like having their mouths washed out with lye soap if caught. Their spiritual practices forcibly replaced with Christianity. Their cultures, their histories ridiculed, denigrated. It was a systematic erasure.
So not schools in any real educational sense, more like institutions designed to erase identity. What about the actual curriculum? What were they taught?
The curriculum was geared towards making them marketable for mainstream American society, but in very specific, often menial roles. Girls learned homemaking skills, cleaning, cooking, sewing. Boys learn trades like carpentry, farming, blacksmithing. Academics stress American beliefs, American values. Even sports were used to push American ideals like teamwork. Think of someone like Jim Thorpe, the famous athlete.
Right, Carlisle produced him.
Exactly. He became a symbol used to justify the whole mission. They even used transformation photos, before and after pictures of students to market their supposed success in assimilation.
The human cost, though, it must have been immense. Not just the cultural loss, but the personal trauma.
Impossible to overlook. Survivors' stories are filled with counts of physical, mental, emotional abuse. Sexual abuse was widely reported as well. And the official investigation, the Department of the Interior's Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, confirms at least 973 documented child deaths, with at least 74 marked and unmarked burial sites found at 65 different school locations so far. And the report itself acknowledges the actual numbers are certainly much higher. Just a devastating loss of young lives.
It's truly staggering. And it wasn't just the children who attended, was it? The impacts ripple outwards, affecting generations. That inherited pain you mentioned. Can you elaborate on those long-term effects?
This is so critical for understanding the present day. That loss of identity, language, ceremony, self-esteem, it created and continues to create unresolved grief, mental health issues, substance abuse, economic hardship, and relationship issues. Studies actually show former attendees have significantly higher rates of chronic physical health problems, things like cancer, tuberculosis, diabetes, also PTSD, depression.
Wow.
And here's something really striking. One study found that even a father's boarding school attendance was independently associated with chronic physical health problems in his children.
Intergenerational trauma manifesting physically.
Exactly. And children who did return home often felt, quote, lost and out of place. They couldn't communicate with elders who only spoke their native languages, severing those vital intergenerational cultural connections.
Despite all this, this immense challenge, this multi-layered destruction, the spirit of indigenous peoples endured, which led to decades of resistance, ongoing efforts for healing, for justice. So what does this history mean for us today? Where are things heading?
Well, the tide, arguably, began to turn policy-wise with the Indian Reorganization Act in 1934. It specifically repudiated the Dawes Act, aimed to restore tribal control, communal ownership, self-governance. A major shift, though implementation had its own issues. More recently, we see really powerful examples of land-back movements, cultural revitalization efforts, driven by indigenous communities themselves.
And one incredible example of that enduring spirit, that resilience, is the Wyatt tribe reclaiming Tuluwat Island in Eureka, California. Tell us about that journey.
The Tuluwat Island story. It's such a powerful testament to persistence. After that horrific 1860 massacre we talked about, the Wyatt people, quote, always intended to go back to the island. It was sacred ground. Starting in the 1970s, it was actually Jerry James's great-grandson, Albert James, who began the formal effort. The tribe first had to regain federal recognition they'd lost it during the so-called termination policy era.
Which was another attempt at assimilation, basically dissolving tribal status.
Right, mid-20th century policy. Anyway, after regaining recognition, they finally managed to purchase just 1.5 acres of the sacred island in 2000. But they knew it was an environmental disaster site. Polluted.
So they got it back, but it was damaged.
Heavily damaged. They spent nearly 15 years with volunteers, eventually government support cleaning up over 60 tons of industrial waste, wood preservers, chemicals, scrap metal. Finally, in 2014, they could celebrate the return of their land and complete their world renewal ceremony, the very ceremony interrupted by the massacre over a century before.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. But it also highlights, as the source notes, that land returns often come with strings attached. Conservation requirements, restrictions on putting land into federal trust status, which impacts tribal sovereignty. It's complex.
It sounds like it. And the fight to protect indigenous children, families, that also gained legal ground with the Indian Child Welfare Act, right? How did that come about?
Yes. ICWA, passed by Congress in 1978. It was a direct response, acknowledging the wholesale separation of Indian children from their families as a tragic reality of American Indian life, fueled by the boarding schools and biased state child welfare practices. ICWA set federal standards for child welfare cases involving Native children. The goal: prevent family breakup, promote cultural connection. It requires active efforts to keep families together or reunite them, and gives placement preferences first to extended family, then other tribal members.
So vital for addressing that intergenerational trauma we discussed.
Absolutely, reinforcing cultural continuity for the next generation.
And what about more recent government actions? specifically acknowledging the boarding school era.
A major step came in 2023 with the release of the Department of the Interior's Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report. We mentioned some findings earlier, but it really laid bare the scale, confirmed 417 federal schools, 451 sites, quantified the federal funding over $23.3 billion in today's dollars appropriated between 1871 and 1969. And it crucially highlighted the role of religious institutions, finding 210 schools were run by at least 59 different religious groups, but with U.S. government support.
So government and religious institutions working together in this system.
Correct. And the report concluded with recommendations for healing, for redress, that should be, quote, commensurate with the investments made in the system itself, a call for significant action.
We've also seen apologies from religious bodies, internationally too, in the last few years. What's the significance there?
Yes, these are significant symbolic moments, at least. In 2022, Pope Francis apologized for the Catholic Church's role in Canada's residential schools, a very similar system. Then in 2023, the Vatican officially renounced the doctrine of discovery, those 15th century papal bulls that historically gave European Catholic nations justification to conquer non-Christian lands and peoples.
A doctrine with huge historical implications.
Immense. And then in 2024, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops issued its own formal apology for the Church's role in the U.S. boarding schools. These are important steps in acknowledging deep historical wounds, even if they are long overdue for many.
What a journey we've covered today. I mean, from the earliest colonial violence, a disease, then decades of systematic land theft, forced assimilation through policies like the Dawes Act, the horrors of the boarding schools, right through to these ongoing incredible efforts for justice, for land reclamation, for healing.
And if you connect it all, the big picture really underscores how these historical policies aren't just history. They actively shape the present. That legacy of trauma from the boarding schools, for example, it manifests today. Mental health challenges, substance abuse, economic hardship, even physical health issues passed down generations. But at the same time, you have the Wayat tribe reclaiming Tuluat Island. You have the passage of ICWA. These narratives show remarkable resilience, a powerful drive to heal, to preserve culture against overwhelming odds. It really is a testament to enduring strength.
It's so clear this isn't just past history. It's a living reality for so many people, so many communities. For you, listening, what stands out most from this deep dive? What insight into these policies and their impacts will you carry forward?
Maybe consider this thought. Drawing from Secretary Deb Haaland, the first Native American cabinet secretary in U.S. history, she said something powerful. We have survived not in spite of our indigeneity, but because of it. So the question to ponder is, what does it truly mean for a nation, for both the U.S. and Canada, really, to heal from this kind of past? And how might genuinely acknowledging these truths reshape not just Indigenous communities, but the very fabric of national identity moving forward?